Today we're going to be picking up where we left off from the last time, and we're going to be in Roman numeral 2. Today we're going to be looking at temperate grasslands and how animals and plants adapt there, and we're going to compare it to the tropical grasslands that we talked about the last time. So this is Roman numeral 2A. Temperate grasslands have mostly grasses and very few trees. And that's for the exact same reason that tropical grasslands have that, and that's because there's less rainfall than a forest. If you look at this picture, you can see that there are no trees in this one. That would indicate that there is no rivers or streams in this area, and that there is very little rainfall. B, they are similar to tropical grasslands in many ways. Now, one way they're not similar is their location. This red line is the equator, and most tropical grasslands are located in areas somewhere on either side of that line. Temperate grasslands tend to be located on the outside of that in the northern hemisphere in this area, and in the southern hemisphere down here. Number 1. Like tropical grasslands, temperate grasslands have less rainfall than forests. They receive 50 to 88 centimeters per year, or 20 to 35 inches. Now, notice that 35 inches right there is right at the lower range of what's required to support a tree. And so if you do have a grassland that is right at that amount, then they will occasionally have some trees, but usually you're not going to get a big stand of forest like you do when you've got more rainfall than that. This is a climatograph of a typical temperate grassland, and that would be in Wichita, Kansas. The first thing I want you to notice is that unlike the tropical grasslands, you're getting the red line, the temperature line, is showing you that you definitely have hot and cold seasons. Unlike the tropical grasslands, which the temperature line is even, it's the same all year. Also, notice down here for the rainfall, much less rainfall than what you would see in a forest. Number 2, so we're still talking about temperate grasslands. They have hot summers and periodic drought. That would be times when you have even less rainfall than normal. C, temperate grasslands are different from tropical grasslands in that they are not usually located near the equator. This means that they may have cold winters. Now, that's not a bad thing. It does tend to help the soil. And we'll talk about that in just a minute. If you look at this map, you can see that the middle of the United States in North America is a temperate grassland. You also have some down in this area of South America. You get some in Asia, and you have a few just small places in Australia. D, these grasslands have unusually fertile soil and is the most fertile of any other biome, and this is due to several reasons. This is the soil that everybody that does agriculture wants to have. Number 1, low rainfall means less leaching and erosion. If you'll remember, leaching is the process where rain falls into the ground and soaks in and dissolves minerals and then takes them away. So the soil is less fertile. Well, when you have less rainfall, you don't have as much of that occurring. In addition, if you have a lot of things growing and a lot of grass growing, then you have less erosion because you have all those roots that are holding the soil in place. Number 2, definite seasons mean that there is a dormant growing season and gives time for nutrients to be replenished by decaying grasses. In the tropical grassland, there is no dormant season. Things are growing year-round, and just like with the tropical rainforest, that means there's never a time for the soil to recover. In the temperate grasslands, since you have a time of the year where everything is dormant or not growing, it gives the soil time to recover from all the nutrients being pulled out, so it tends to be more fertile. E. Temperate grasslands tend to be located in the interior of continents where there is less rainfall. So if we look at North America, this is a grassland right here in the center. So why is it that there is less rainfall here? Well, if we look at the next sentence, it says mountains help to maintain them by creating a rain shadow which prevents greater rainfall from occurring. So here's what happens if you look at this picture. If this is the Pacific Ocean and this is the Rocky Mountains right here, the winds tend to blow from west toward the east. That means that as they blow over the ocean, they pick up moisture. Well, as they rise, as the air mass rises to get over the mountains, it cools off because it's going higher up, and the water condenses and falls as rain on this side of the mountain. Once that air mass gets on the other side, it is now very dry, so there's no rain to fall out over here on this side. So we call that a rain shadow. Well, if we look over here at the map, all of this area right here is the Rocky Mountains. So you get desert because there's so little rainfall. But as you move further east and get away from the mountains, water from down here, the Gulf of Mexico, gets pulled up and provides moisture so that you can get some grasses growing right here. F. Temperate grasslands are called by different names in different parts of the world. Number 1, in North America we call them prairies. And the height of the grass is directly related to how much rainfall you have. If you look at this map, the red area indicates the heaviest rainfall for a grassland. It's still not enough for a forest, but it's the most for grassland, and so you get taller grasses. Number 2, this area right here, medium amount of rain, medium height grasses. Over here, as you're getting closer to the mountains, least amount of rain for a grassland, so you get the shortest grasses. They're directly related. In Asia, in this area right here, these grasslands are called steppes, right here. And in South America, they are called pampas, and it is this area down here. They all are talking about the same thing, temperate grasslands. They just have different names because there's different languages. So if we look at this video, it will tell us a little bit more about the properties that we see in this kind.
Students didn't get here from the WOW classroom. Since most of the U.S. was once a large grassland, we decided to explore in more detail what makes up this unique biome. So we sent Rob out to a research station to find out what the scientists are really doing.
So here I am at Cedar Creek Natural History Area, and here they study prairies. But prairies just so happen to be only one of the types of grasslands. Now across the globe, there are a few major regional expressions of temperate grasslands. The Russian and Chinese steppes, the South American pampas, the South African felds, and of course, where I am right now, the North American plains and prairies.
And as far as prairies go, you can divide it up more depending on how much rainfall you get. There are the short grass steppe prairies found in drier climates, and the moister tall grass prairies found in wetter climates. So let's head out in the field and see what the researchers are doing.
So as it turns out, Cedar Creek is on an ecotone between the prairies, the deciduous forest, and the boreal forest, which makes it a great place to study why grasses dominate this ecosystem. So the question still really is, why do grasses dominate while trees do not?
Well, there are three reasons why grasses dominate the prairie ecosystem that you see behind me. One is drought, the other is fire, and the third is herbivores like deer and bison. Fire comes through annually and burns all the baby trees to the ground. It's not a good situation for the trees, okay? And then drought comes in, there's not a lot of rain, and so trees require a lot of water for them to grow big and strong trees. And so, the grasses do well without a lot of water, but the trees like a lot of water. Herbivores will come in and they will eat a lot of the baby trees to the ground. And so the baby trees are like, oh no, this deer is going to eat my leaves and I am not going to be able to grow big and strong. And therefore, the grasses remain dominant in the grassland ecosystem.
We at Cedar Creek have hundreds of kilometers of long-term observations. We're trying to learn more about the prairie ecosystem.
It's great!
For instance, in one experiment, they've been recording biological diversity in prairies and found that the grasslands are dominated by one or a few species, but have a huge number of rare species found dispersed in between. In another experiment, they've monitored grasslands to see what happens when fire comes through, herbivores graze, and when exotic species are present. Still in other plots, they've been looking at what would happen if the global carbon dioxide was higher. For example, global warming. They do this by pumping carbon dioxide from large fields.
So we're going to leave finding out the details to you. For more information, go to thewildclassroom.com/biomes.
We're in the grasses, we dominate in the prairies. It's fine to keep rolling and burning this, burning everything. Like a gator got in the cows the other day. I got it out there, we got some gator pies. Good, them gator pies. Oh!
Well, that was interesting. Gee, in ancient times, grasslands covered 42% of the land on the earth. Now think about that. Of all the exposed land, then almost half of it was some sort of grassland. However, due to the fertile soil, most of it has been converted to agricultural use, including grazing and crops. Today, only 12% of the land on Earth is grassland. H. The amount of rainfall will affect the height of the native grasses along with the depths of the root system, which we've already mentioned. Number 1. The grasslands with smaller amounts of rainfall will have shorter grasses, while grasslands with larger amounts of rainfall will have taller grasses. Number 2, the root systems mirror the height of the grasses. In other words, the short grasses tend to have shallow root systems, while the taller grasses tend to have deeper root systems. So if you look at this picture, what you can see is this is showing the root system for the tall grass. Here is the root system for medium, and here is the root system for short. So in other words, you can see there's a direct relation. They each mirror the height of the grasses that they are below. J. Just as in the tropical savanna, lack of rainfall makes the temperate grasslands susceptible to fires. Periodic fires help to prevent the growth of trees. So just like in the video, it showed that fires were one of the reasons why the grasslands remain grass instead of having trees in them. J. Another reason for the lack of trees is the almost constant winds that move across the grasslands. When you don't have trees, or when everything is flat, there's nothing to slow the wind down. So it comes rolling off the Rocky Mountains and across the prairies, and it just maintains speed. There's nothing to slow it down, and so then that means that it's difficult for trees to ever develop. K. Animals in the temperate grasslands include large grazing animals, along with smaller animals that survive by burrowing underground. So for instance, you have bison or any other kinds of grazing animals that you could have in these areas, and they tend to be large animals. These are not animals that would survive in a forest environment because there wouldn't be enough room. You also get things like this. These are prairie dogs, and they burrow underground. If there are no trees, there's nowhere for them to hide. So, and especially if it's short grasses, they have to have somewhere to escape from either predators or from weather and things like that. So they tend to burrow underground. Number one, grazing animals have adapted by developing large, flat back teeth to use for chewing the coarse grass. So they get these huge back teeth that are really flat, and they can grind down those stalks of grass. They have lots of cellulose and fiber that it helps them to stand straight up. Well, they have to break all of that down in order to digest it. Number two, larger animals tend to have thick fur in order to survive the cold winters. Number three, smaller animals such as prairie dogs live in underground colonies that provide protection from fire, weather, and predators. So we will look at something about them.
The prairie dog was one of the earliest inhabitants of the North American continent. Today, this gregarious animal remains a vital part of the High Plains ecosystem.
Historically, there are accounts of prairie dog towns that occupied several thousand acres, and they were quite expansive. There are early accounts of people riding on horseback and never being outside of the dog town all day.
Prairie dogs range over a large percentage of the plains and plateaus of western North America, stretching from northern Mexico to southern Canada. But while their range has remained the same, prairie dog numbers have decreased in the past 100 years.
In the early 1900s, there was an estimate of 8 million prairie dogs, and it's probably down to about 2 million now. So they're hardly endangered at all. 2 million is still a large number.
Although they may imitate common dogs with their bark and playful antics, the high-pitched barking serves as a warning signal that danger is approaching. More akin to squirrels, prairie dogs are actually members of the rodent family. Their diet consists primarily of grasses and other non-woody plants.
The prairie dogs are important, not for the prairie dog itself necessarily, but for the number of species that depend on it. They create holes that other animals live in. The burrowing owl, some of the smaller rodents will live in there, rabbits and rattlesnakes will live there as well. And by kicking out the soil, they're also aerating the soil, and it actually will increase the diversity of grasses in that area.
The burrows that prairie dogs dig are unique underground tunnel systems. A side chamber is usually the first room below the entrance, allowing the prairie dog to turn around. There is a flood room which provides a pocket of air when their tunnels are flooded by heavy rains, a nest, and a refuse chamber.
One of the paradoxes of these mounds is that the idea is to keep the rain out. However, rain does get in, and with the water getting into the tunnel systems, it allows water to infiltrate deeper into the ground than normally would happen. So it's very beneficial for having these holes on the prairie.
Prairie dogs may appear harmless, but they've been known to overgraze areas, threatening farm and ranch land.
The relationship of farmers, ranchers, and prairie dogs has changed over the years, primarily from one of attempting to eradicate the species, of more of an opinion of trying to manage their population levels to where they can cope with them. The future of prairie dogs is well established. People are learning to coexist with them much better than they have in the past, and to a certain degree we can live in harmony just fine.
Okay. L. Threats to the temperate grasslands are caused mostly by humans. That's no surprise. Number one, planting crops instead of the native grasslands has led to soil erosion because the crops have shallower roots that do not hold the soil in place as well. And this is something that we're kind of having to just live with, because we've got to have these areas in order to produce enough food to feed the population. Number 2, grazing animals tend to eat the plants too close to the root, which causes them to eventually die instead of regenerating. This leads to more soil erosion since the plant is not there to hold the soil in place. Sheep tend to do this worse than any other type of grazing animal. And that's all for today.